Hi, and welcome back to Purple Collar Life. In today's video, we're talking about a fairly common problem, seasoned firewood that got wet. That's right, this is seasoned firewood, but the tarp blew off it and it got wet. Now, a lot of things are going to determine how wet that is, but there's some key tips I can give you to help dry this wood out faster. It's not like you've got to let it re-season again for a year or 2 years. This is a different kind of moisture. This is surface moisture, and as long as it's not been sitting in the rain for weeks on end, that moisture is just going to be on the surface or slightly into the wood, not all the way into the center. Let's talk about some ways that wood can get wet and some ways you can dry it out if it has been wet. So in the intro you saw a pile of seasoned wood that the tarp blew off of. That's pretty common here in Northwest Pennsylvania. Winter times, we can get some gusty winds. The last couple weeks we had winds in the 40s and 50s, which not only created a massive wind chill, but also blew the tarps off of our firewood pile. Now, the IBC totes hold up a bit better in the wind. I use a rope to tie what I call my rain cap, which is the top of the bladder cut off, onto the tote. I know some people make the TP method and prefer that. It does extend a little bit further down the sides, but you're still going to have what is issue number 2 with wet wood. You can see this wood up on top that's clearly under the cap, nice and dry, ready to burn. Again, you'd want to hit this with the moisture meter, just because being out in the moisture will potentially put some surface moisture on it. But what happens with the rain cap is we've got a couple lines here where the rain's coming down right here and dripping, so you can see this piece nice and dry at the back, very wet here at the front. And then as you work further down through the tote, because of the wind blowing or pieces sticking out a little bit further, you can see these pieces are wet, at least on this outside inch or two. These pieces down here are fairly dry. So you are going to get some moisture in an open container like an IBC tote when it rains or snows. And there are solutions to these problems because, like I said, this is surface moisture, not inside moisture, not internal moisture in the wood. The first thing you want to do, if you don't already have one, is to get yourself a moisture meter. I've got multiple of them. This one, I'll put links to both of these down below, Amazon affiliate links. If you decide to order them, we'd appreciate if you use those links. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but does give us credit for sending you to Amazon. This one's the one I've been using the most just because the display is so much larger, easier to read those numbers as you get older. But you can see, even from a distance, stick this in the wood, 12.5 on that one that came in from outside, but clearly that was the downside. So let's look at the top side here. 25.3. So as they start to sit down here longer and dry out because of the fan and the dehumidifier, I move them out to the outer row. Let's give this one a check. 13.0, 12.8. Let's give this good piece of oak a check. 10.7, 10.3. So as you can see, there is a solution to if your wood gets wet. There's a difference between surface moisture and inside moisture. Like we talked about, a piece of wood like this, when it's green, it's going to take a year for about an inch in to dry out. So this would take 1 year, it would come an inch this way and an inch this way. It's going to take longer than a year to get to the center of that piece for it to fully dry out. So this was already seasoned. It was exposed to the elements that could be rain, snow, sleet, who knows what. And I was worried because it was outside. But I have a procedure for handling that. I bring it inside as quickly as possible, so either here into the basement or into the garage, and let it kind of dry out in the drier air so it's not exposed to the elements any longer. These ones, you know, I put them in the back row. We keep a fan on them. We keep the dehumidifier going. They dry out from that surface moisture pretty quickly. I move them to the front row when they're ready to burn. So this piece of oak, this piece, these are dried out enough. You check everything with the moisture meter to make sure it is less than 20%. I like it less than 15%. Once it gets to that point, I'll go ahead and throw it in the fire. If it's still a little bit over that, I'll move it inside, closer to the fire. That dry air coming off of the blower of the buck stove dries things out really quickly. That could be your gloves, your hat, your boots. I put all those things in front of the buck stove if I want them to dry out quickly, and that includes firewood. So if it had a little bit of moisture left in it, I just stack it on the floor, kind of sitting upright like that, with the blower hitting it just like this, and it'll dry out really quickly. But again, moisture meter to test it. And key point here is that surface moisture is not the same as inside moisture. Inside moisture takes years to get out. Surface moisture can dry in a week or several days, depending on how dry the area you're moving it to is. Now, one of the first questions that people will ask is, Chad, how long is it going to take to dry now that it's been wet? I'm showing you this wood that's stacked in my building for a couple reasons. First of all, it's good to have a supply like this that does not get wet. So this is, you can see some double bubble in our building here. We're sitting behind the back of the boat, and this is where I store my best dry wood. And this is in here for a couple reasons. A, it will not get wet in here. And B, it's easy for me to get to in the wintertime. If I can't get to my other wood, this is wood I can throw in the back of the side-by-side or in the big tool rack or even on the back of the four-wheeler to get into the basement and burn in the wood stove. The second reason I'm showing you this stack of wood inside is inside storage is great to use for drying out wood. So if we've got some wood that got a little bit of surface moisture in it, sat out in a snowstorm or a rainstorm, and that moisture is just on the outside, move it into a dry location like this. In the winters here in Northwest Pennsylvania, we do not have very much humidity, so just being out of the elements will dry that wood out fairly quickly. And you're asking, how long? How long? Well, it really depends on the environment. If I put it in the section of the basement where the wood stove is burning, blowing that dry air around, it doesn't take more than a couple days to eliminate that surface moisture. Again, always check it with the moisture meter. But once you get down to 20% or less, you're okay to throw it in that wood stove. Like I said, I like 15% or less personally, but 20% or less is what a lot of people will recommend. So inside storage, great for storing wood that you need to remain dry to keep that fire going, and B, great for storing wood that needs to dry out from some surface moisture. Here's some more wood that got wet. You can see this is an IBC tote for firewood with my rain cap on it. No copyright on the word rain cap. You're welcome to use that. But you can see the top wood probably stayed dry, but I've already taken that wood to burn in the fire. So now this wet wood that's on the bottom is getting wet from the drips. So there's an example, wet piece of wood. But we can save it. We did a previous video, which I'll put a link to up above, about seasoning wood in the wintertime. And because our air is fairly dry here in the winter, wood will season. The same premise can be said for wood that has surface moisture. It will dry out even in the wintertime in Northwest Pennsylvania. We just have to get it out of the moisture. So if we can get it somewhere like a wood shed or inside storage, this moisture will come out pretty quickly because our air is dry right now. Once you've brought your wood inside out of the surface moisture, there are some ways we can speed up that surface moisture drying process. Now remember, the physics of drying things are always the same. You're going to need some heat, some airflow, and dehumidified or dry air, and that'll speed up the drying process, in particular for the firewood. So here in the basement, I've got multiple dehumidifiers running. In the wintertime, they actually don't run that often because it stays pretty dry. But if I crank the moisture level on them all the way down so that I'm pulling every bit of moisture out of the air, move them closer to the firewood, it'll help dry that surface moisture off a lot faster. The other thing I'll do is I'll use a fan to blow air across the firewood. That'll help pull the moisture off the firewood. It kind of circulates through the air, through the dehumidifier, gets the moisture out of the air. So dual purpose there. Moving air always helps dry things out quicker. And then the third method, I will set pieces of firewood in front of the fire, a safe distance away, let that dry, hot air blow across the firewood, and that also removes the surface moisture pretty quickly. So I've got a process for when I bring in wet wood or wood that has surface moisture for getting it dried out so I can burn it in the wood stove. Now remember, this type of wet wood and green wood or unseasoned wood are totally different. This is just surface moisture. Don't think that you can pull a green piece of wood in, run it with a dehumidifier, a fan blowing across it, or even in front of your wood stove for a couple days and dry it out. It's not going to work that way. Inside moisture in green wood takes a lot longer to dry out than just some surface moisture on the outside of the piece. Thanks for watching. If this video informed or entertained you, we'd really appreciate if you'd give us a thumbs up. And if this is your first time visiting the channel, thanks for stopping by. We hope you'll consider clicking that subscribe button and following us along. Here in Northwest Pennsylvania, we do a lot of firewood, chainsaws, log splitter, the wood burner, tractors, mowing, outdoor rural living here in Northwest Pennsylvania. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again the next time. And if you guys have some tips, leave them in the comments down below how you can help other people learn ways to remove that surface moisture a little bit quicker on wood that accidentally got wet. See how close we can get here. We do have some corn for them here, so they do like the corn in the bucket. I like it on this dinner table here, which used to be Mackenzie's zip line platform. Here comes some more coming up through the woods. So we've got 2 here to the right, 3 more coming up through the back of the woods. It's been really cold the last few days. The ground was frozen. They appreciate having a little bit of corn as a treat here.